The I See Dead Plants podcast shares the stories of people and plants, pests and pathogens, and the conflicts among them. Join us as we speak to the folks who attempt to solve complex problems with plants through pest management research. I See Dead Plants is an extension-based podcast created by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. Music written and recorded by fellow plant pathologist Sean Toporek and hosted by Ed Zaworski.
Welcome back to the I See Dead Plants podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ed Zaworski. Today, I'm joined all the way from Auburn, Alabama, by my special guest, Dr. Kathy Lawrence. How you doing, Kathy?
Doing good. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be here.
I'm really excited about this. I was telling Kathy before we started, we're going to be talking about Reniform Nematode in cotton, but I don't have a lot of experience with this nematode. I've only seen it in person one time when I was learning how to ID nematodes many, many years ago at this point. So I'm excited to hear about it. As usual, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Kathy. She did her bachelor's at New Mexico State University in agronomy, master's at Mississippi State in plant pathology, followed by her PhD also at Mississippi State in plant pathology. And she is currently professor at Auburn University. All that sound right?
Yeah, that's all correct.
So, Kathy, I just like to start off with some opener get to know you questions. So, and this is probably my favorite part of the podcast. I've said it many times. How did you become interested in agronomy or plant pathology or nematodes or fungi and all this fun stuff that we love to talk about here?
That was my first job in college. So I was in biology, but there was a job in plant pathology. So I got lucky enough to get the job, and they were working with air pollution in New Mexico. So I worked with pecans and air pollution, and that was so interesting. I moved into agronomy because that was the degree program they had there, and went ahead and finished up in that. And then as my advisor, as an undergraduate student, his son was at Mississippi State. So he took us and sent us on to Mississippi State to do our master's degrees, where I continued on with plant pathology. It was quite interesting. I started off working with fungi and soybeans, which you have lots of those. And then a new disease showed up, that sudden death syndrome of soybean, while I was working on my master's. So we started working with that and identified the fungal nematode interaction between those two. So I stayed on with the PhD as we worked all those things out. So one thing led to the other.
That's kind of crazy. I did my master's on soybean sudden death syndrome and SCN.
Yes, it's still here.
It's still here. Actually, I was just out in the field yesterday. I think if it's not the hottest day of the year in Iowa, it was one of the hottest days that we had. It was about 99 degrees with a heat index of 115. And I don't even know what percentage humidity, but my colleague and I, Darren Mueller, we decided to go out scouting for what would be another new disease to Iowa, not to the U.S., but red crown rot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you guys have that.
Yeah, we have that. You don't have that yet? That's
not
good.
yet. Okay. We're keeping our eyes out. I think that's kind of a thing that Darren and I really like to do as plant pathologists. Is one of our, I don't know, it's not something that you want to do all the time. If all you ever did was scout fields in the hot summer heat, it'd get kind of old. But it's one of those things that we like to do just to get out of the office a few times a year. When tar spot, we've talked about tar spot in this podcast a lot. When tar spot was new, that was one of the things we did. Well, that one we did for a couple of weeks, traveling all over the state trying to find it. But red crown rot, we're on the lookout. We didn't find any yesterday, unfortunately, but I did see some really great SDS.
Oh, great. And this is the time to go looking. So it's the perfect time to go see if you can find it in the field.
Oh, red crown rot?
And SDS. It's perfect time for most anything on soybeans. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that I've ever had the pleasure, despite the fact that I worked on it for my master's. I've seen plenty of SDS plates and the blue spore mass formulations there, but I saw it for the first time pulling up some root systems yesterday and snapped some great photos on my phone. So I was happy as a clam, even though it was like I was in an oven.
Yeah.
With regards to nematodes, what brought you to nematodes? Was it just happenstance again? And then secondarily, what do you like about working with nematodes?
And that was, it just happened with the fungal nematode interaction. So truly I do both. I do fungal nematode interactions. So on cotton, we have all those nice soil-borne diseases. We have a wealth of root knot and reniform nematodes around here. We have a few of your soybean cyst nematodes too, but not many. So down in this region, we have soybeans and cotton and corn. So a focus of Reniform has just been what's going on. So that's where we've moved on that direction. It's what's exciting, what's happening.
As a plant pathologist, I have to start with that. As a plant pathologist, I'm somewhat jealous of you guys down south in the diversity of the pathogens and the nematodes and the crops that you guys grow. Not that I'm not excited about corn and soybeans and the pathogens that we have here, but it's always exciting to talk about something that I'm not familiar with, for one. But you guys have a lot of stuff, a lot of different stuff going down there. It's
That's true.
interesting.
Farther south, when I talk with you guys, I realize that we have so much more diversity than you have, because we even have peanuts that are thrown in. So there's always something new, and watching who goes between what and what happens after which crop at each rotation. So it does make a lot of different things to watch. So we're always looking at those possibilities.
So Kathy, I got to ask you, do you have a favorite nematode?
Oh, well, that's hard, because I do enjoy working with the Reniform, but the root knot nematodes are so much easier because you can grow so many thousands of them, 100,000 so easily when you're working with them. I can kill the root knot a lot easier. Reniform's a lot harder. But, it depends on what's going on. We've got a lot of new resistant varieties in cotton, so that's exciting to see something work in the field. So with that too, so you enjoy all of them?
I enjoy all of them. Somebody introduced this nematode to me. I'll see if you know what it is. Somebody introduced this nematode to me as the cutest or most adorable nematode.
Is that the ring nematode?
Oh, okay. I'm trying to. I don't
know.
remember
That's the one that's most dramatic, and yeah.
Yeah, there's something about it, but I'm trying to just instill in people that is the cutest, most adorable nematode. I don't know. I don't remember who told me that, but I like it. So
easily recognized too. Yes.
Yes. Massive stylet, strong annulations. So anyway, yeah, with that, thanks for that background, Kathy. With that, I guess I'd kind of like to jump straight into Reniform Nematode. Can you kind of give us like an overview? Maybe I don't know if you want to start with life cycle or with history of the nematode, whichever you'd prefer, but
so it was first identified in 1940, but I had to look that up to make sure. And it was on black-eyed cowpeas or black-eyed peas, and in Hawaii. So that makes this one very different and unique.
Wow.
And I love working with the people in Hawaii with this Reniform nematode, because it's such a problem there as well as here. So they have issues with it on pineapple. And for my biggest problem is cotton, but it's the same nematode, which is quite interesting that it can do both crops like that. But it does. I looked up the host range. There's been 386 crops tested in the literature. 86% are host. So I know from here in our area, dicots are more of a problem than monocots.
Gotcha.
So most of our dicots, including all those nice weeds, are good hosts for this nematode. So it is quite diverse. It can go, but for that aspect, this nematode is tropical. So it's tropical to subtropical. So as far as I know, the Boot Hill of Missouri is as far in the literature that they say it goes. I don't think you have any up there in Iowa, not at all. I've heard of a report in Kansas, but right next to the border with Oklahoma. So I don't know if it still exists. It's not in New Mexico, or it's not reported in New Mexico, Arizona, or California. So it likes the tropical, warm, moist areas. And that's where we find it, around that equator belt around the world. So there's some great literature out of India working with this on peppers. Gotcha. So it's everywhere and such a diversity.
So it's all the same species then that goes to all these different
there's 10 species.
Okay. Gotcha.
But in our region and everyone I've worked with, pretty much it's reniformis, but other areas may have some of the others. But we're Rhodolinculus reniformis, which means, just like your soybean cyst, it's half male and half female. So we have large numbers of this nematode, but half of them are male and they never feed. So unlike your soybean cyst, these males, they live maybe 2 weeks, they mate with the females and they're gone. They never feed. So it's just the females that enter the root, go through the life cycle and reproduce the eggs.
Gotcha. And these guys, if I remember correctly, they're a semi-endoparasitic nematode?
Exactly, semi-endoparasite. So you can see them, but not really. So the head enters the root, establishes a feeding site in the cytoplasmic area, and feeds on just a few cells for the lifespan. And depending on the species, it can be giant cells or syncytium, but either one, both of those exist in those different species. And the posterior portion of the body is on the outside of the root, and that female begins laying eggs. So the dirt particles all attach to her. So when you dig up the roots gently, you can't see a cyst like you see on the soybeans, but you can see what looks like a dirty root with lots of dirt particles attached. So in our region, 5th to 6th week, those plotting plants are not doing much. You dig them up gently and you see those roots, which are lots of dirt particles attached. I wash them very gently and you can see that reniform.
Maybe I'll have to see if I can get some images from you after the podcast. That'd be a kind of a cool thing to see. Because I didn't realize, I've never seen them on the plant. I've seen specimens in a, vial of water. So, so yeah, that'd be cool to see. So you mentioned about 300 something hosts.
Yes.
Cotton. What else in the South there? Cotton, soybean, peanuts.
Does not go to peanuts, does not go to corn. It will go to soybeans, but it doesn't like them. It's not the primary host. It will survive on soybeans, but it's not its favorite. So it loves cotton, does a good job with tomatoes, but there's a lot of diversity in those tomatoes. Cowpeas, many of the vegetables, it'll go to the vegetables is where it really will go. So for us in our region, cotton is its primary host.
Are there any, I'm sure that there's non-crop hosts that it goes to as well.
Weeds are everywhere. Yeah, morning glories, pigweed, prickle cider. Oh, all of those nice weeds it'll go to, but many of the grasses not.
Okay.
But it will go to many of the dicot weeds. So I even have a slide I'm presenting next week at the nematology meeting in Brazil of a nice corn rotation, but if it's full of sickle pod and morning glory, it's not going to do any good.
So weed control is
in
paramount.
the corn and the soybeans is but in corn it's more difficult as you're waiting for that harvest. I know, at least down here.
Does it interact with any other pathogens similarly to soybean cyst?
Yes. If it always seems to make any of the other diseases worse. So we have a cotton fusarium wilt complex with the nematodes, and it doesn't matter if it's root knot or reniform. Either one of them increase the entry areas for the fungi, and the cotton is affected more definitely, and it tends to die quicker. So we do have that one, but we also the rhizox, the pythiums, the Thalaviopsis, all those natural soil-borne organisms. If you have a nematode with them, it's always much worse.
Oh, do you often see co-infection with other nematodes like root knot?
Well, that's an interesting thought too, because from work that we've done before, the reniform outcompetes the root knot. So when it comes in, it's not picky. It'll feed anywhere on the root system. And the numbers are so large in this nematode. So sometimes it's considered a wimpy nematode because it takes 100,000 of them, but they're there so quickly. So it outcompetes root knot. I don't know for sure on cyst because it doesn't like a soybean as well as soybean cyst does.
Sure.
But when it comes to cotton, reniform will take out the root knot. Now, that's not going to do you any good.
Yeah.
Won't do you any good at all because root knot likes those apical tips and only feeds on that young, very sensitive tissue. But reniform will attack anywhere on the root system, so it will outcompete.
And I if I remember right in reading some of the papers that you authored, it sounds like it really prefers more of a clay soil.
Yes.
Which I found really interesting.
It exists everywhere in the state, and the populations stay lower on those sandy soils. But in our high nutrient soils, a little heavier clay, mostly silt, where we could produce 4 bales to the acre, which is really great yields. That's the same soil that the reniform does really well in. And root knot doesn't. Root knot likes our sandier soils. So in our state down south toward the ocean, it's sandy. We will have reniform, but root knot seems to be more of the problem. Up north with our higher yielding areas, it's reniform. And that's the siltier soils is where we have those.
Man, that's kind of a tough one. You can't escape, because
no, can't escape.
Most of our biggest nematode problems, especially with soybean cyst here up in Iowa, is like what comes to mind for me up here in Iowa is Muscatine County. It's a really sandy soil. It's down by the Mississippi River, and you see some of the higher soybean cyst nematode populations there. So I had to do a double take and read it a couple times this one likes more of a clay, silty soil.
Which makes extracting it that much harder, trying to get it to go through the sieves. So we use a lot of that calcium to disperse it in the soil to try to get them all out. Yes.
Yeah. I have way too much experience with extracting nematodes from soil. And yes, the siltier, heavier clay soils are just a joy.
They're tough. That's why we typically will soak them overnight to get them to disperse so we can get the nematodes out. In fact, an area of Alabama is called the Black Belt region on the west side, and it's mostly cattle production. So we've taken some of that soil with a past graduate student, and he put it in all the different soil types. And it's not there right now, but that soil was such a heavy soil, the nematode populations just exploded. So I spend more time on extension meetings saying, please be careful, don't bring it in, because that nematode really would like that soil.
So just out of curiosity, hopefully I don't bore my audience too much because I know way too much about cyst nematode, but as far as extracting Reniform nematodes, is it similar to the process of extracting cyst nematodes? And I mean, I'm assuming you count eggs to quantify them in the soil, but...
And typically we get the eggs off the root system. So I like to dig up the plants themselves and extract the eggs off the roots, because then I know exactly how many are really on that plant and not just in the soil.
Gotcha. Okay. So so it would be like for us, we, in our diagnostic clinic up here, for example, we run we call it a complete nematode analysis, and we encourage our clients to submit roots so that we can capture the endoparasites.
Yes.
So that would be your preferred method to do.
That's preferred. Reniform. They want the roots with the soil, so you've got everything to tell what's there. Yes.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, it's similar out of the soil, but you also collect the cyst stage, and we don't have that.
Yes.
We just have vermiforms.
Okay. Gotcha. How is Reniform nematode been managed over the years? I mean, I'm sure that it's changed over time, but go for it.
We have lots of good news on that part. So 20 years ago, when I first started here, we started screening as a huge project with Cotton Incorporated, looking for some resistance. Now, 20 years later, we have a resistant variety. So it's taken that long. It's been classical breeding. And it's not the university or USDA, it's the companies. So Delta Pine and Phytogen both came out with them. But it was with all the work with the USDA and the scientists that were looking. So we screened over 2,000 different genotypes looking where they finally found. And now, I think it's been 3 years now, we finally have a resistant variety. It's got 2 genes for root knot, 1 for Reniform that's on the market. I know they're both still working because I've screened some others that have more genes now. So finally, we've come to the point to where we have some resistant varieties, which is wonderful.
Was this one of the nematodes that was ever being controlled by soil fumigants? Do you know?
We can't afford fumigants.
Well, that's what I figured. It's not easy on a large scale, right? So we
had aldicarb, and aldicarb pretty much took out that issue. Now we lost aldicarb a few years ago, and now we have it back. So I know it is licensed through AgLogic out of North Carolina, and I believe it's in Florida and Alabama and Georgia. I don't think it's come all the way to you all. So it's a small licensing, but we have that back. So we didn't really have so much of a problem when we were putting aldicarb down, but it came on the market in 1968. So it stopped working in the early 2000s as well. And we also lost it at that time, but it has recently come back. So that gives us another, but we have lots of nematicide options. Everything new is coming out that way. I don't know if you're seeing them on soybeans, but we are definitely seeing a lot of new ones on cotton.
As far as seed treatments?
And in furrows.
Oh, and in furrows. Yeah,
and
that's something.
Corteva and Syngenta as well as Bayer. So all the companies are coming out with something new, which is nice.
I'm not aware of anybody using any in furrows up here, but there are the seed treatments, obviously.
Have you ever wondered how much yield you lost in past years due to pest and pathogen issues? Now you can access expert estimates using the CPN Field Crop Disease and Insect Loss Calculator. Just enter the crop, year, and diseases you saw in the field and your location.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of interested. I mean, as far as I'm assuming maybe with the aldicarb, like on like a small breeding project or something like that. There's probably not any large scale field operations where that would be applied, right?
Oh, no, yes, many of our growers
Oh
are
yeah.
using it.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, okay.
Yeah, if they've got nematode problems and that also gives them the insect benefit, we have a lot of insects down here as well.
Yeah.
That's a major issue, yes.
Like I said, lots of interesting stuff.
Yes. So there are those that do, and the ones that believe in it use it. There's others that believe in the Vidate sprays, so they'll come back and do sprays, but you've got to have moisture for those to work as well. So we do have quite a bit that are applied, as well as most of them go in with a seed treatment nematicide too. But with cotton, I don't know on soybeans, the cotton variety is the most important choice. And
Right.
those agreements are made between the chemicals and the seed people. So the variety you choose depends what nematicide is available on that
Ah,
seed.
I
So
see.
it's unfortunately, we don't have free choice. It's already made in those agreements. So once they pick that variety, it comes with whatever fungicides and nematicides are already on there, and then they add from that.
And you mentioned, and I kind of read about the resistance that we've gained in
Yes, it's
cotton.
great.
It's relatively recent, right?
Yes,
Like,
last 3 years, we've really had it available.
okay,
And
okay.
it makes such a difference in our reniform fields. I'm lucky that I have on the research station, we added reniform to one location. And then we have a road. And then right down the way, I have the same field, same soil type, same irrigations, everything's the same. So I plant all the varieties in both of those fields so we can see
Hmm.
how they do with reniform as well as without reniform. This nematode takes out the yield by 50%. So that since 2010, we lose 50% of our yield. So it's amazing. Unfortunate with that. But the resistant variety, when I put that resistant variety in, it doubles the yield. So it almost makes up for to be equal in the field without the nematode. Almost, but not quite. But it brings that yield back.
Hmm.
So it's amazing what the resistance has done.
So I'm just curious, like along the lines of it being such a damaging nematode, like a 50% yield loss with resistance or not with resistance. Has it always been like that? Was it just a difficult thing to breed resistance for, as
Yes,
far as
it's
past
classical
years, or
breeding. It was
gotcha.
classical. I remember many years ago, Monsanto thought they were going to insert genes, but apparently that was not possible. What we've gotten is through classical breeding only. There are no GMOs with nematode resistance. Even though we've known about nematode resistant genes for many, many, many years, inserting them apparently is an issue.
Gotcha.
So everything we have is classical breeding. Now we have 3 genes right now, but they're trying to add more. And it's really neat. They've come out with the Thrive On cotton, which means it has a gene for the thrips. And they're trying to also add that to the nematode resistance, but that has to go by the classical. But they're hoping to get some of those out next year too. So I hope we have that too.
Yeah, I had Scott Graham on what
Yes.
what seems like years ago at this point, but probably wasn't. I don't know. And we talked about the Thrive On
Mhm.
with regards to thrips. So it's just a function of classical breeding then that took it a while to come to fruition in cotton.
Yes, it did. It did.
It sounds very much like I talk about this all the time too, but I did a podcast very early on when I started doing this on coffee rust. And
Oh,
it's not exactly the same because the time it takes for a coffee tree to come to fruit and, understand its resistance to coffee rust it takes a while, but
a long time.
but it's kind of a similar concept here with cotton is you have to do this classical breeding and
Yes, it takes a long time. And Scott Graham and I have some of the Thrive On in the Reniform fields, and they're coming out with a lot of different ones. But we've been watching this. The Thrive On ones tend to be more susceptible to nematodes.
hmm,
So I'm
gotcha.
saying be careful. If you've got a bad nematode field, add a nematicide because it can give you that benefit. But every time we add something, we take something back. It's always that balance that takes a while to work out.
So, man, this being relatively new technology makes it pretty exciting. But do you see, I guess, in Alabama, let's say, Are there fields, are there farmers that have been dealing with reniform problems for years? Does it depend on the year?
And it does. When I started, there was an extension agent who had maps of where they were, and there were just half a dozen counties across the state. And we surveyed it again, and now 30% of the counties, or almost everyone where we have cotton production, has reniform. So it's spread, but typically it's our equipment. So anything that has the soil particles, I'm sure with assist. If we pick up from an infested field and go to a clean field, we're taking it with us. That just happens. Or if we have any flooding of any rivers, if it comes through the infested field and moves it into, and we have a lot of flooding down here, so that happens. So we've moved it, unfortunately.
Despite our best efforts, it's it's tough to get equipment completely clean and
I know. And I keep it limited on the station, but as soon as we plant that nematode field, we sit it in the sun and let it sit there for a day because the heat will take them out.
Oh,
but
yeah.
You just got to let it not do anything for the day in the sunlight.
Yeah, I suppose between the heat and the UV.
Yes, it'll kill them, but you got to clean it. So we just power wash it off and clean and let it sit. And we don't spread them, but I know growers don't always have that time.
Past 3 years, we get this resistance, these resistant varieties of cotton. What do you think the adoption rate of that is now? Like, is it everybody who has a reniform problem is growing that, or
they're
is
moving to it? The ones who are
growing
have the reniform problem are moving because it doubles the yields. So that's dramatic. Although from the plant pathology aspect, and I don't pay for it, but I pretty much ask, think about adding that seed treatment nematicide because I've worried it took us 20 years to get here. Let's keep that resistance. Let's add a nematicide, another IPM practice, and try to get them with 2 methods and not lose this too quickly. Because our nematodes are sexually reproducing. So whoever survives, the races you have in soybean cyst or HG types, and you want to call them. Let's keep them, let's keep our resistance, add a nematicide of some type as a seed treatment to try to do 2 methods to keep these nematodes down.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, obviously we're still young in the area of having the resistant varieties, but I imagine at this point we don't have the knowledge of, are there, you mentioned HG types, right? For soybean cyst nematode. Like we don't have the equivalent in Reniform nematode at this point, right? Because it's still early, right?
It's a hot topic in the nematologist. Some would like to develop it. Others say, no, because we've watched what happened with cyst. You had 16 races. Do you have 64 HG types?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it gets complicated in a short amount of time. And many of our young ones would prefer to do a molecular test, which I'm fine with that. If we can find a marker and decide who's what, that's great. So there's a lot of arguments on that part. So we haven't done anything. We haven't done anything. I'm waiting for one of the new scientists who's molecular to tell us why one's different from the other. And I have a little marker. I can just plug it in and figure it out and make it nice. But right now, different soil types, different areas, different varieties, they never behave the same.
Sure.
Yes. And in some years, in my typical field I've been using since 2007, I'll get 60% reduction and it can go to 20% reduction. Just depends on the environment.
Are there different modes of resistance at this point?
I know there are 3 genes that I know of that they have told us about. Some affect egg production, some affect the feeding site, but we're not told all of it.
Okay.
So, that's proprietary within the company. So I don't know all those details.
Do you know, do they mix the different modes? Are there multiple modes in one variety?
And then how many copies of each gene are in each variety? That makes a difference too. Yes.
Gotcha.
So that's the issue as well. So every variety has those 3 genes, but they're not in the same copies. They're not in the same locations. They all behave slightly differently.
So let me see if I can recap for myself and for my audience. Basically, at this point, you have the resistant varieties that are probably recommended if you have a reniform problem, and you're also recommending to cycle through different modes of action for nematicides to kind of reduce the possibilities of resistance, right? Would be the kind of current age of management. So
yes. Now down here, which we have that you don't have too, you can do crop rotation. So we're always suggesting that keep that cycle going. Because if you move to corn, it's not a host crop. It'll drop the populations in 2 years. But that depends on the market, what the market prices are and whether they do that. And soybean, you can go to soybean. It's a host, but it's not going to reproduce as well.
Gotcha.
So that works. And peanuts are not a host. So if you have a sandy soil, you can do that. If you don't, you're not happening. But you can do corn or soybean, and that works well. So we have rotations that are always options if they can. If depending on prices is what usually drives that.
I probably should have asked you this earlier, but I'll jump in now with it. And I'm really bad about doing this throughout podcasts, and I should do it for every crop just in case listeners are not that familiar. And I'm really not familiar with cotton either, so it makes it easy for me to ask this question. I mean, what is like the typical rotation for your average cotton grower in Alabama?
And I would think they'd pretty much grow cotton. It's a long season, so that's going to take the entire season. They'll come back with a cover crop, which is usually whatever they're putting on the field. Soy, it could be wheat. I'm sorry, wheat is most often, or it could be a rye, sometimes a clover mix. They come back in the spring, and if they go in early, they'll plant corn. And then if they do a wheat, then the next time, or they may take their corn out and do a soybean if there's time. And down south, they can do it. Up north, they can't. Then they come back with the wheat. So usually they're putting it in every other year or so, a couple of years of cotton and then a year of corn or soybean, and then go back to cotton because typically it has made more money than the other crops. But that can change in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no kidding. If a farmer has a particular problem with reniform, does that change the way that they rotate at all? Do they ever, is it ever such a problem, and maybe less now with resistant varieties, but do they ever rotate for longer periods out of cotton or anything like that? Or
that all depends on the price of the crop. So if cotton is making more money than corn, they're growing cotton. If corn's making more money, they'll go that way. It just depends on the price of the crop more than the nematode problem.
Yeah, I keep saying this, and sometime I need to make a trip down and visit with some of my fellow plant pathologists such as yourself and kind of just see the system.
Scott and I, you can come run out and see the insects and the diseases and the nematodes all the time. Yes.
Because it's so different. It's so different from it is up here. It's very, don't get mad at me if you're from Iowa and you're a grower, but it's kind of simple, and it's kind of sometimes it's kind of comforting in its simplicity. But yeah, you guys have a very complex, interesting system down there, and it makes pest management that much more a little bit complicated. And
I love all your large acreages though. When we're up in your area and all those combines going through the field, that's huge. We have tinier spots that we're working around. You have some beautiful, massive fields up there. It is beautiful to see.
So that's interesting too. I mean, what are we talking here for your? And this is a broad, sweeping question, I know, and there's probably not a great answer for it. But what is kind of a typical size for a cotton field?
Oh yeah. Compared to you all, our research station is 750 acres.
Okay.
So that's the whole thing. And I know yours are much more massive. Our average farmer, I think it's about 1,000 acres. Okay. Although there are families that have 25,000 acres,
Sure.
So it varies within that, but usually it's at least 1,000 acres. Many of our growers are also, I don't know if you have this, chicken houses. So they have poultry houses as well. So a lot of our crop guys have several poultry houses. So they take the chicken litter, they're using it on their crops. So they do both animal and crops at the same time in our region. I don't know if you have that as well. It works out nicely putting in that poultry litter back into the field, the organic matter.
I don't know about chickens in Iowa. If you're a chicken farmer in Iowa, I'm sorry. I know we have quite a bit of quite a few turkey farms, and obviously a lot of pigs.
Are you wondering which fungicides to use for a particular corn, soybean, or wheat problem? Check out the Crop Protection Network Fungicide Efficacy Guides. These guides can help you identify the best fungicides for the disease you are battling.
I guess what I'd ask you next is what are you currently working on with regards to Reniform Nematode, Kathy?
I'm always into the new varieties with and without nematicides. We have those going as well as the rotations, looking at the best things. In our lab too, we also have biological plant growth promotion. So I've moved in with Dr. Joe Klepper, was the one who retired recently, who did plant growth promotion and did many of the original bacteria that go on cotton to give it a stimulation and growth. So we spend, 2 new students are screening hundreds of bacterial isolates that we've gotten from the desert and from the salt at the beach, looking for anything that'll promote plant growth. So we're looking for all those biologicals and testing them, looking for any plant growth promotion that we might be able to add to the system.
Gotcha.
On our cotton seeds, I don't know about you guys, we have so many things on each seed. Each seed usually has 3 fungicides, at least one biological plant growth promotion, a couple of insecticides, and then a nematicide. So even before we plant this seed, it's coated. It comes with everything. So we're adding more things to it, anything to increase that beneficial health.
Interestingly, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I remember sitting in on a talk I think that Greg Tilke was giving about soybean cyst nematode. And this didn't pertain just to nematodes. Obviously there's fungicide seed treatments as well. But I think he was talking about the stat of prior to a certain year, a very low percentage of seeds were actually being treated. And then post a certain year, it's almost every seed. You almost, I think it's very hard to find untreated seed at this point.
Yeah.
I think you can, obviously,
We cannot
but
get black cottonseed. I have to save it, delint it myself to have a black control to go with it. So yes, it's one of the best benefits you get because that seed package costs the same amount of money, whatever depending it has on it. So
but it sounds
it's
like
given to you. Yes.
sounds like you can have quite the cocktail down there for all the different
Yes, we
pests.
do.
So.
And it changes each year. Yes.
Kathy, I think at this point I could move us into wrap-up questions, but I like to stop and pause here and see, is there anything that we missed about Reniform Nematode or any other points of interest, interesting research going on out there, that kind of thing, before we move into the wrap-up questions?
Okay, there's always lots of reniform research going on, and there's always something interesting, but it's also in vegetables. So I love to go out to the vegetables, but we have reniform and root knot in the vegetables. So the sweet potato industry, any of those vegetables, which are always fun to work with. They're quick and easy. Not easy, they're quick. You get a lot of information quickly in those seasons, and you can repeat them. So the first crop to the second crop, I can increase those nematodes dramatically before you go into the second season. Because our season down here, it's at least 170 days. So we have more time than you do to increase. So with the nematode, in the north part of the state, I may run out of time. We may have 5 to 6 generations, but in the south, there's some seasons it never freezes. So it continues. I think this nematode is as far north as that Boot Hill region, but then we're tropical. So we typically can keep it going, which is always good to watch and see what's going on.
Always fun for a pathologist and always...
Oh, that's true. I'm sorry. I have to be careful on times too. Yes.
You don't have to be careful for me, but you.
Oh, I understand. Yes, yes. But when we do have somebody come in and do some vegetables or some watermelons, that'll be a hot spot. And you'll have to go back through and see yes, those things will happen.
That's interesting. So they'll reproduce much better on those crops then, so in essence, and that's another thing I rarely think about is, we in terms of soybean cyst nematode up here, I'm used to, a few, 2, 3, maybe 4 generations in a season, and then that's it.
Yeah.
So you
true.
have the potential, like you said, in southern Alabama it goes all year.
It goes all year. And down here, sometimes there's machines that'll pull the stalks up trying to get the nematodes out of the soil. So you won't have any more reproduction. We spend a lot of time on chemicals to kill the plant after you've harvested it. So it won't keep coming back to make sure you don't have any wintertime generations going on. So we spend more time and money killing that cotton plant because it is tropical. It'll keep growing. So if it doesn't freeze, we got to take it out so we don't have more pests for the next year.
That's a really, obviously we talk IPM here all the time. That's a really interesting facet of IPM, an interesting cultural practice that I don't think I've ever heard. Obviously tillage, I guess. I can't say I've never heard that, people would till to, sink parts of a plant infested with a pathogen under the soil and maybe get rid of some of that inoculum. But yeah, I don't know that I've heard physical removal of the plant, especially with regards to nematode. I was picturing somebody like, yanking up soybean stems up here to get rid of soybean cyst
No,
or
they're called
something.
stock pullers, and they'll rip them out of the ground and take some of the roots with them too. Yeah, we do try to kill them and get it done so it'll stop. We go through a lot of winter cover crops trying to also reduce populations. There's some big radishes that are not host, but as soon as you put cotton back, that population will come back. But you've increased the organic matter. So if we watched it for more years, we might see more of a difference. I work with a lot of graduate students, so usually we're getting them in and out every 2 to 3 years, so they don't continue. I need to have one plot where I just keep watching it for 10 years. See, if we can increase that organic matter, we reduce the numbers, but it's one of those slow processes making it happen.
Interesting. Have there ever been any trap crops used for reniform? I know there's been a few graduate students here at ISU working with different cover crops with regards to soybean cyst nematode. So I'm sure probably something similar has happened with reniform, where
and
maybe
we really like to, but our planting window. So we've never truly been able. Now, on that part, it's an interesting fact that I know in Texas, especially, I hear about it from my colleagues there, that if we plant our cotton and it doesn't come up well, and I replant at the coast all the time because we'll have 10 inches of rain and you'll have to redo it again. But when you have to replant, the nematodes all entered that crop and they're not going to be a problem the rest of the year because we lost a good portion of them. So if they have a hailstorm and you have to replant, or if I have 10 inches of rain and I got to go back and replant, the nematodes all entered. But waiting to plant late here is not really a good option because hurricanes may be coming in and you're going to lose all your cotton. So we can't guarantee the weather. So that's not a good option. But the perfect crop for having the nematodes enter it and not the cotton, we have not come up with. That's another area we need to work on some more.
If you're a Midwestern grower or ag professional and you're hearing all of this, just remember and be grateful, I think. We don't have to think about the hurricane season.
Problems. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And everybody's, current problems probably seem mundane to somebody else's problems, but man, this has been really fun to hear about, just in the sense to hear about the cropping systems and the challenges of,
it's always
a
something
southern
new.
farmer.
Yeah. And there's a new foliar nematode that we've seen on soybeans. It's in Brazil. So just like you, I've been watching the coast, waiting to see if that foliar nematode, Aphelincoides, will show up. Haven't seen it yet, but just like you, I'm out there watching. If it's in Brazil, the first storm that comes across.
This might be a spoiler, and hopefully, it happens if I say it. But I've been trying to work out talking to somebody in Brazil about the foliar nematode. So
that would be great.
Hopefully I can get that set up this winter, and if it all goes well, we're gonna probably try to do like a NPR style voiceover translation to do something about it. But I'm really very curious about that.
Yes.
So you're watching out for it
We're watching.
Alabama.
Nothing so far.
Okay.
As you know, with the red crown rot you're looking for, I know it's out there. It's going to show up. I just hope to catch it when it does, so we can contain it.
Completely off the topic of reniform, but has that been a big problem in Alabama?
Oh no.
No.
Red crown rot?
Yeah.
No. It's just exciting for the plant pathologist when I find it here, there, and yonder. No. Not
That's
a problem.
fair.
I've seen it in Louisiana where when I worked over there, and more often than I do here. I don't know why, but that was also some 20 some years ago. It was more of an issue than it is now. I think our biggest thing on our soybeans is those darn kudzu bugs that keep coming in.
Interesting.
Do you have those?
No.
There's a natural Bavaria fungus that'll wipe them out. It's just me waiting. Hopefully that comes in fast enough that the bugs are gone, because I want to do a nematode test and don't want insects to affect it.
Man, that I do need to make a trip sometime. I think we have a videographer here in the ISU IPM office that I work out of, and we've talked about this for years. I think we're gonna have to try and make it happen. We could come talk to you. We could come talk to Scott. Ed Sikora. There's a bunch
Oh
of people
yeah,
down there at Auburn.
come
We could
visit
come
us anytime. The
pick your
fall's the
brain, shoot
best
some
time,
video.
although you're so hot too, you might not mind.
Yeah. We got this. I mean, I'm sure you guys do too. I mean, the killer humidity and the heat combo is
Yes,
just,
yes. It's a
well,
little hot outside today. This is a
I,
good day to do a podcast.
I should have asked you earlier, but did you grow up in New Mexico?
Yes, I grew up in New Mexico. Yes.
So
It's a
more of a dry heat, right?
dry. It's hot, but there's no humidity.
It's got to be a big change.
There are nematodes out there, but we spent more time working on air pollution, which we don't have over here. So that's not an issue.
Well, I think with that, Kathy, I'll start into the wrap up questions, which I also think are pretty fun. And the
Okay.
first one I have for you is you could take it generally, or you could take it as it pertains to Reniform. What do you think the future of nematode management holds? Like I said, either in the form of Reniform or just nematodes in general, because they could
We
kind of
love
play off of each other.
Yeah, resistant varieties, but add the nematicides and keep the crop rotations going. Cover crops always help as we move them on in. So all those things are beneficial, but I know they're making a million decisions on all the other issues that are going on at the same time. And of course, prices drive everything. But there's many options, so it's always good to figure out the best for the most recent things. And I enjoy, the best part is all my students have gone through the program and are out there working. I can always call and talk with them and see what issues are going on as they're out in the field. So that's always nice. And if any of you Iowa kids want to come to Alabama, we're here.
Yeah, I mean, if any of them are listening, you've heard
That's true.
it's very well. No, you've heard it's very interesting down there, very exciting stuff, right?
Their parents are listening, but you never know how many of those young ones are out there farming too, as well. So there's a lot of applied work going on. They could see some diversity, and football's big here, just like it is there. So they don't lose that.
It might be bigger down there, I don't know.
I don't know.
But with regards to breeding for resistance, I mean, and the future of this management, do you see this continuing? Like, do you see companies continuing to try and breed for more different modes of resistance, or just different? Yeah, I don't know. Do you think that that'll keep expanding? I mean, most plant pathologists, when you ask them what's the best form of management, they're going to say host resistance. Do you think that that's going to be a thing that's expanding as time goes on with regards to managing Reniform?
Vitagen's still working and Delta Pine is. So I'm sure some of the others will also keep going. So it must be, if you're benefiting our yields by 50%, it's definitely worth it. So I think so. I could be wrong, but I think so.
I kind of asked you this earlier, but just in case there's anything else we missed, I'll ask it again. Do you notice any trends with growers that are trying to manage Reniform nematode? I mean, you mentioned they're slowly coming around to resistant varieties, but do you notice any other trends with regards to how they're handling
Just the
this
crop
nematode?
rotations. Many of them now do have their crop rotation sequence as they're going across their fields. And they do rotate different fields to the corn and the soybeans. So down here, we do have the corn, soybean, cotton rotations, but then many of them also have those poultry houses. So they're doing management of almost the animal crops and the field crops and making it all work together. So I've been amazed they can keep up with all of that, but they are.
Yeah, you mentioned like all of the different things that we have to juggle. I mean, like you or I would be, think that the nematode is of the utmost important, and it is important. It can reduce the yield by 50%, but there are other things too, right? So it's important.
There's so many decisions to be made.
Do you? My next question is kind of about. We've talked about this a little bit, maybe in offhanded ways, but with regards to the Reniform nematode, you mentioned like the farthest it gets is in like the Boot Hill of Missouri. Do you think that as climate is changing, I mean, it's affecting a lot of different pathogens, it's affecting cropping systems. Do you think that this nematode would have the capability of moving further north as climate changes? Yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
As it gets warmer, if it does, then it could move farther north. But if you have a freeze, this one's not gonna, our soils don't freeze. Your soils freeze, don't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. See, we don't do that. And in our area, I don't think we've had snow the last 2 years. So that's, I love meeting you guys at the meetings and I see all these coats and I'm thinking, oh yeah, no. So it depends on how warm you get. As it gets warmer, it could go farther north, but this one's tropical. It has the ability to survive drought. So this nematode, interesting, it curls up into a little donut and can sit for 2 years and then come back. So it does the anhydrobiosis and then it'll come back and attack crops. So I've kept soil samples for 3 years in the fridge and they're still viable. So it could. But as soon as I do worry, in my field plots, when we have some bad freezes up north, in the north part of the states, and it stays cold and we have 5 degrees, which is terrible for us, but not much for you, that kills my nematode numbers. So they drop dramatically. So that means my tests are not quite as good as they would have been if it stayed nice and warm. So my populations drop. But as it spreads, it will. But this one is tropical. This one is tropical. So I don't think it'll find you in Iowa anytime soon.
No.
Tennessee might have to worry, but not Iowa.
This is what plant pathologists have sleepless nights about, if it's going to get too cold and kill all their nematodes. And not up here in Iowa, we won't have to worry. But I mean, as far as like something like you mentioned the Boot Hill of Missouri, moving shorter distances, I'm just curious, would you have any recommendations for somebody that's like in an area that's nearby where there is Reniform nematode? I guess like as far as equipment cleaning and that kind of stuff.
Yes, definitely wash that equipment. In fact, I've had class students who buy a lot of equipment from up north for their farms down here because you guys keep it covered in the wintertime. So they say the best equipment comes from far up north, but when they get it into town, they go to the car wash and wash it all off before they come to their fields because they know they'll bring in something that we don't have. So yes, they do this. Just wash that equipment, keep it clean. And don't go from an infested field to a clean field. If you've got a weedy or you've got a problem field, whether it's nematodes or diseases or weeds, do that one last.
That's kind of interesting. You know, I hear people up here in the Midwest talk about all the time that, you know, with regards to a used car, a used vehicle, that's like the ideal situation would be for somebody to come down south, because we apply road salt all winter and all of our vehicles are rusted, but you don't have to probably worry about that with farm equipment.
We don't have any salt. No salt, but you have the best farm equipment.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad to know. So, Kathy, the last final question I like to ask everybody is this. It's I phrased it as, if you had to explain Reniform nematode in cotton or any other crop, whatever to a member of the public, you know, in a short elevator speech. And I don't know, I'm not going to put a cap on how many sentences or anything, but how would you explain the importance of that to somebody who just, you know, they're not familiar with this world and they've never heard of this and that kind of thing. And you had to tell them, this is what I do. This is this nematode. Here's why it's important.
This nematode costs our growers 50% of their income. So economics makes quite a bit of difference. So if you've got this pathogen, you're going to lose 50% of what you make. So on the other aspect, think about it, what it's going to increase. If everybody has it and we don't have anything to manage it, that should increase prices of everything for the consumer. It's going to increase their prices because we wouldn't have so much cotton to actually produce anything. And if you think about cotton fibers, that it's in all the clothes, all your favorite blue jeans, if those prices go up and double because of a pathogen, that's when it's going to hit home and you'll know. But think of all the cotton sheets. We even have a grower in North Alabama who produces his own sheets, and you can buy sheets from the grower. It's amazing how they come up with their own niche.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, from your perspective, I mean, I'm just thinking, putting myself in your shoes, like that's got to be a really fun's not the right way to put it, but it's a really impactful pathogen, right? Up to 50% yield loss. I mean, there's a lot of pathogens that can cause that kind of damage, but it's under, you know, usually under a pretty narrow range of conditions. But this one, it's out there,
and
it's in the soil. And
so once it's there, it's there. So that's why I guess we do all this keep things clean. Don't bring it in, because once it's in that soil, it's not going to go away. We have not found a soil which can naturally bring down those populations. So we
Gotcha.
haven't found those natural pathogens. We keep looking. We're watching. We haven't had the success there. And if it's 20 years to get a resistant variety, how long is it going to take us to find the rhizobium that produces the nitrogen on the soybean? I don't know how long that may take. We're looking. We have not found it yet.
Well, for all those young undergraduates and graduate students who are hopefully listening to this podcast, I try to plug it to them all the time. If you are looking for something really interesting, there's a lot of stuff. I'm not saying this is the only interesting thing, but check out what Kathy's doing. Check out Reniform Nematode. With that, Kathy, I leave time at the end of all these podcasts. You've had to endure the questions, and this is your time to make any acknowledgments that you want to make. And if you have any resources that you want to point people towards, I will put them in the show notes as well, but you can let people know at this point as well. So you've got the floor.
All the hatch funding, our Alabama Cotton Commission and the Soybean Commissions for all their funding. That's always been great. We also appreciate all the graduate students who've come through and done all their hard work figuring out all these issues as we've worked with it. And many of those are now working with Bayer and Syngenta and Corteva and furthering our ag industry. So those students are wonderful for building our research and going on and building our industry as well. So we thank everyone. We have we have a university webpage, and some of that information's on there. Not all of it, because it's never updated as I should, but we try.
That's also a theme in this podcast.
But thank you. I appreciate being invited up, and come down to visit us in Alabama anytime. We've got so many good diseases we can share.
I need to. So one of these years, maybe next year, I was halfway there with Ed Sikora this year, so maybe I can.
Oh, you've got to come. We have a brand new cotton gin. So we lost one last year from a tornado. So we have a new state-of-the-art cotton gin that's very close. And I know you haven't seen one of those yet, and that's an amazing.
I have not.
Yeah.
And I would love to.
Yes, please come down anytime. There's lots of us to come visit with. We'll keep you busy.
Perfect. Stay tuned, folks. If this is something you'd be interested in, some video content, some podcast content where I go down to Alabama, definitely let me know. I'll probably do it anyway, but if it's something that you want to see or hear, let me know. So with that, Kathy, this has been really fun talking with you, learning a lot about Alabama agriculture, cotton, and Reniform Nematode. So with that, thanks folks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
I See Dead Plants bridges the gap between plant science research and the impact it has on our daily lives. It is brought to you by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center, which are both partially supported by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. For more information on today's topic or other pest management issues, check out our show notes, cropprotectionnetwork.org or ntipmc.org. Remember, this information is for entertainment purposes only. The statements made in this podcast should be interpreted within the limited context of the particular topics being discussed. Contact your state extension program for local information on pest management. For the full non-discrimination statement or for accommodation inquiries, go to cropprotectionnetwork.org/about. Thank you for listening to I See Dead Plants.